The first word is called a taxpayer. Now, I haven't talked to anybody in the normal, we'll say the normal world out there in our system that doesn't think that everybody isn't a taxpayer. They're just, oh yeah, you've got to pay your taxes. You know, we're all taxpayers. And I spent probably 2 years in my initial involvement with the system. And this was back in 80 when I told you I got involved. I had the IRS knock on my door one day through my CPA, and they said, well, you know, you have a $2,000 obligation this year. And quandary with that, because I've been working for this company for, maybe 10, 12 years at the time, and I've always paid my tax. Everything was up on the up and up. I had a CPA taking care of my stuff, so nothing was hidden. And this CPA tells me I owe him $2,000 this year. And I asked him, well, how is this possible? I said, I haven't done anything different. My salary's the same. All my deductions are the same. My same kids in the house. Everything's the same. He said, well, I think what happened is, he didn't think, they changed the tax base. And in that moment, it was like, what? What do you mean they changed the tax base? Yeah, well, yeah, your gross income, it moved up into the next raise. They bumped everybody up a notch. And if you happen to be close to that crossover, then you got into the next bracket. And so guess what? You got an extra $2,000 obligation on your yearly income. Well, that kind of put me into a tailspin because, you know, back in '80, that was a sizable amount of money. And I had to go borrow in order just to break even that year. Well, it also pushed me, and at the time I'd already been involved with a particular spiritual group, and I'd been warned. I'd already been warned that there were things that were going to happen to me as I started to evolve into these other levels, these other worlds, and I might not like what's going on. But remember this, no matter how difficult the scenario might be, you're always going to be shown what you need to find and to help you as well as the whole in your endeavor. So don't be dismayed. Don't quit. Don't ever think that it's going to be greener on the other side, because it's not. And you're going to be working off a lot of things from your past. You may not know it at front. You may not like it. You may not agree with it. But as you go, these little doors will open and you will be able to see through those doors all the things that have brought you here and your responsibilities as you move forward. So it took me to the law library. There's one in every county, by the way. And I started to research this stuff about the IRS. And at the same time, I was also introduced to a group that were very heavily involved in the banking system. They're trying to figure out how it works, showing all of the stuff that they do and why they do it. And for some reason, I just kind of fell right into that. It just, my head was just like, oh, yeah, I know this, I know that. And I began to see things that I had never been introduced to up to that point. But all of a sudden, I was openly aware, and I knew what it was I was looking at. Well, I ultimately discovered that this term taxpayer that everybody's been led to believe that 99% of everybody is, in their own rules, by the way, their own code, their own CFR, it only applies to officers, employees, and elected officials of the District of Columbia and its territory. That's what a taxpayer is. And if you don't believe me, you just go look it up under 6331A of their code, 26. It's in there. That's exactly what it says. And it not only says it there, but if you go back to the 1861 Congress, you'll discover that when Lincoln was in the midst of his little game with the Civil War, he created with Congress a statute, a rule governing the taxation of property in all the people in the whole country. And it didn't matter where they were, they got taxed at some rate. Well, in that definition, in that whole thing, he also identifies the taxpayer, which again is the officer, employee, elected official of the District of Columbia. It's also commonly known as the United States, because the United States and D.C. are one and the same when it's used in all their codes, rules, and regulations. It does not include one of the states. Their jurisdiction over the people in the states and the states are very limited. But most people don't understand these differences, so they just accept their codes, rules, and regulations as if they apply to everybody, and they don't in regulations. These rules, regulations, taxing statutes, codes, they only apply to commercial entities and people involved in the commercial side of things affecting the public. They don't apply to the private person, the private citizen. So as we move along...
Mike, can I interrupt you just for a minute? It's good. Can you... Bob's having a little bit of trouble hearing you. Maybe you could speak up a little louder and maybe a little slower so he can get what you're saying, and we'll be good. Thank you.
Okay. All right. I was working up to the part about the rights that were the question in the first place. What are our rights? Well, your rights are many, but if you don't know how to claim them, if you don't know who you are in their world, in their system, then you're subjecting yourself. It's by your own agreement. When somebody calls you a name and you accept that and you allow yourself to be that, then you can't blame anybody else. And it just so happens that amongst their hidden rules and regulations, there are certain specific things that the people, if they knew they were there, and if they would take the time to do a little research and take a step in a direction that most people are deathly afraid to go, they would find a door bigger than they can imagine, and the freedoms and the rights to do the things that the people want at the revolution would again begin to evolve onto the people generally, just by association. Tell you how many people I have made personal contact with who have now began to look and realize and understand what it is I've been talking about for a very long time. And one of them is that voter registration thing that so many people are caught up in and so irritated about. There's a statute on our books in California. It's in the 1925 code, and it deals with the exemption for private transportation. It actually exempts the private side from the motor vehicle code, the whole code. That includes their insurance, their registration, and all the other stuff that goes along with it. Now, that doesn't mean you can go out and run people over and you're not subject to the cause and effect side, because you are. And that's another issue of discussion. But these little pieces are all available for the person who's willing to take a little time and do something that most people are just afraid to do. And I can't tell you how many times I hear people, well, I'm going to have to get an attorney to do that. And, well, maybe you do. But if you'll take a little time, follow a little direction, read some stuff that you may not have been willing to read, or that you've been kept from discovering because of the educational system that you've been led to believe is the only way you're going to learn anything, if you'll take some little steps in here, you're going to find some other doors. And, of course, that new you part of this whole process, that's the key. Turn that key to start with. If you're not willing to take a step into the other worlds that you're not even aware is there, if you're not willing to put your trust in something bigger than you and that has more power than you can even imagine, if you're not willing to take that step, that's the biggest risk you will ever take. Once that door opens, there is no risk beyond that, because you're going to be taken care of in everything you do, because you're going to be doing it for the whole, for you and for everybody. And there's principles that go along with this so that you'll know that you can cause some crap if you don't keep your eye focused on what the real principle is. You just can't go out there and shove truth down people's throats, because you're going to find there's a consequence for doing that. But when you become the example, and that's the best thing you can do, be the example for what you're doing. And if you're focused on something that most people are afraid of, are scared to do, and you know it's what they're looking for, but they're unwilling to look at, when you're doing that, you're going to find that there's a movement behind you. There's a group of boys that are looking down on all of us and helping with all this stuff, and all it takes is just a little bit of a push for you in the direction that's usually scary. It's going to take a little bit of, we'll say, a fortitude to be able to overcome some of the things that you've been led to believe that are told lies to another level, and to help a bunch of people that are directly associated with you who will begin to see that there's truth in what you're doing, and they're going to want to know, well, what are you doing? How does this work?
Oh, Mike, Mike, can I interrupt you for a second? I'm sure there's I'm sure there's going to be a lot of listeners listening to this talk later on that never heard of the new you. Could you explain that to the people that have no idea what you're talking about? Could you explain it to them so they know what you're referring to?
Sure. There comes a point in time when you may be in a situation where you have no answer for your dilemma. And I mean literally. I found myself there many years ago. And in that moment, I found that I was asking for help. And I wasn't asking the local minister or the local governor or the president or somebody else. I was talking to something I had no concept of. But something inside me was saying, you need to ask for help. And then you got to pay attention to what you get for an answer. Well, that happened to me. And this raised my vibratory rate. There was a word that I was given to chant while I was in my quiet time, and literally any time I was doing anything, this word became part of me. And the word represented a frequency, a sound current. And once I started doing this, and I would ask a question in the moment of quiet, or even sometimes in the middle of a storm, the answer would come. I had to learn that the first answer was the one. And that's when the doors really began to open. So the new you, even though it's not the word I was using initially, the guides, the people that will come to your, I'll just say come to your rescue, although it's really not. They're not coming to your rescue. They're waiting for you to step up and to take the chance to do something that you would not have otherwise been willing to do. And when you do that, they're going to step in there and help you understand, help you get the right answers you need, and maybe even help with opening a door or two in the right direction because you're willing to do it. If you're not willing, forget it. You're already beating your head up against the wall. But the new you that's now being presented, and Dwayne is he's the guy. He's the one that's connected directly with the boys. He's been put in charge of the bringing forward a process to help those of us who are ready to take that step to move out of all of the controls of all of the lower world. And it's a very small window. It doesn't happen constantly, but it happens periodically. And it depends upon the status, the station, the consciousness of a group of people in a particular place and time. And it just so happens that our country and the people that have migrated here, who are also looking, are being directed here for other reasons than they may suspect. But that door, the door that Dwayne got the key, he's handing it out to people, he's putting the little indicators up all over the place. It's about fishing, and that's all he's doing. He's fishing for people who are ready to take the step. So the new you is your key. You silently, outwardly, however you want to do it, but if you chant this word and you do it on a consistent basis, even though you may not have results in the very beginning, it depends on what you're about, what your state of mind is, what your consciousness is. You may not get any results right away. And that may be just simply because you've got a little attitude about whether you really think it's going to work or not. You may be one of those people that do it for a week or two or three and get nothing and say, this is a bunch of hooey. Well, you just cut your throat from ear to ear because it's getting rid of the attitude of it working or not. It's the key.
Okay, yeah, we're jumping around a little bit here. Thanks, Mike. We're jumping around. Some of the audience may not be able to follow this, but we do have. Let's go to the audience and see if there's anybody here that there's one caller here, 650 number, and see what they have to any kind of feedback here. Are you there, 650?
Hello, I'm looking for the nearest and best Korean restaurant in Orange County, preferably with some spicy orange chicken sauce. Could you direct me?
Yes, I think you have the wrong number here, Miss. That you could probably just Google that if you have a smartphone. We are here to help everybody. So we're here for everybody, and everybody is included in what we do. So just go to your smartphone. If you don't have a smartphone, ask your mother. Okay.
So the new UU isn't Korean food.
Well, it could be if you find the right restaurant, sir. But at this point, we were on the subject of the Constitution and the government and all that. So, if you listen to the show, you may find the answer later on. Maybe by the end of the show, you'll get your answer.
Thank you, sir. We'll look you up on ICANN, the Who Is service, and we'll find out where you're located. Thank you very much.
You bet. Thanks for the call-in.